Now, I listened to your tapes again the other day, and you mentioned that genetically some people need longer recovery time, correct?
Well, sure, obviously, just as there are those individuals who do not tolerate exposure to high-intensity sunlight stress as well as others, with Scandinavians and albinos at one extreme who tolerate literally almost no exposure to high-intensity sunlight stress. At the other extreme, you've got Negroes. And now here's an important part, TC. Perhaps more important, you've got everything in between. Now, it's a very interesting issue you bring up here. Maybe I can best explain it this way. Only if there was a God would he have the luxury of being able to look inside of your body, read your genetic material, your DNA, and be able to tell you with absolute certainty, thou shalt perform exactly 5 sets per workout every 76 hours, sir. Any more, any less will compromise your progress. Now, I've never pretended to be God. I can't guarantee those who call me or buy my books that I would start you out on the same baseline program that God Almighty would, although I'm not so sure it ain't the same program. All I can do as an informed and a highly experienced trainer is get an individual started out on a baseline program, I call it, one that works quite well for those with at least average recovery ability. Then they get to call me back every 2 weeks or so I can help them monitor their progress and deem whether or not it's satisfactory. If I deem it's not satisfactory, then I recommend certain modifications. Another way to look at it. Let's say, TC, that you were a sun tanning coach, if there were such a ridiculous thing, and you had 50 clients under your charge. Would you bring them all out into the intense August sunlight at the equator for 2 hours the first time?
No.
No. You might burn some of them to death. There is a wide range of variation with individuals in regard to sunlight stress tolerance. However, that does not contradict the fact that in every case the presence of the sun is required. The theory of sun tanning does not change. Nature does require the presence of the sun. Back to exercise. Just because there are those individuals who do not tolerate high-intensity exercise stress as well as others, does not contradict the fact that high-intensity training stress is an absolute requirement for inducing growth. The variation comes in with how much exercise stress any given individual can tolerate. As I made the point on the first tape, I've got some clients only doing 3 sets once a week. These might be viewed as the equivalent of albinos or Scandinavians with regards to sunlight stress tolerance. If you look at it that way, it's not so hard to understand. You'll be less incredulous. Now, most bodybuilders, knowing nothing about this, they'll run to their local newsstand every month, grab up a bunch of magazines, run home, riffle through the pages at random, pick out an arbitrary training program and stick to it slavishly for 2 years, and of course make little or no progress unless they're super genetic freaks taking a lot of steroids. And of course most of us are not that way. After 2 years, they'll either give up or just continue going to the gym, having lost their fire just as a habit or a social ritual. The science of exercise is not infinitely complex, as I said before, but it's not that simple either. There's another point here. Let's say that a listener calls me or buys my book and starts out on that baseline program, and it does work quite well from the beginning. It's also true, now this is very, very important. Very few bodybuilders understand this point, and it's of extreme importance. Let's say the program does work quite well from the beginning. It's also true that as each week passes, he continues to grow larger and stronger, lift progressively heavier weights. Of course, as the weights grow progressively greater, the demands on the body too grow progressively greater until finally, unless he does certain things to compensate for it, and this is the hard part, until finally he'll be so darn strong, the weights he'll be lifting will be so heavy, given the particular volume and frequency protocol he's on, the demands themselves will reach a critical point and they'll constitute overtraining. When that happens, you will experience what we all commonly refer to as a sticking point or a plateau. Now, there was a time up until recently, TC, when I thought that this was inevitable. In fact, I used to tell my phone consultation clients, okay, take this program, stay with it for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks until it stops working. When that happens, call me back and we'll make some adjustments. Now I realize I made a grave mistake. I could have avoided that mistake if I would have kept in mind the very thing or phenomena I just explained, that as you grow stronger week to week, the demands grow greater. If you don't compensate for those increasing demands by doing certain things, you will inevitably reach a sticking point. Keep that in mind, that as you're getting stronger week to week, the demands are growing greater. And compensate for it by periodically inserting extra rest days, eliminating certain exercises, and there are other things. I don't want to go into all this and through that. I'm just whetting their appetite, so they call me for a phone consultation.
Right.
You don't have to reach a sticking point. When you're in possession of a valid theory and you're making the proper application, you should start making progress immediately from the time you start training and uninterrupted, continuously until you reach the upper limits of your physical potential. Now, several years ago, Arthur Jones made the statement that from the time an individual starts training, he should be able to reach the upper limits of his muscular potential in 2 years, and now I realize he was grossly wrong. You should be able to reach the upper limits of your potential in 6 to... We have this called Western science.
Mm-hmm.
I pointed this out to several people, and they became incredulous immediately. And I say, hold on a second. If you were to find yourself in the jungle tomorrow and you happened upon a voodoo witch doctor, he would probably have about a 0% success rate with his patients. Then all of a sudden you introduce to him these miracles called antibiotics, aspirin, sterile bandages. His success rate literally skyrockets off the charts. He thinks you're either God or the devil. We have this wonderful thing in Western civilization called theoretical knowledge. The purpose of a theory, again, is to serve as a guideline for successful human action. If any of the listeners are doubtful that it's possible to reach the upper limits of your muscular potential in 1 year or less, I'll give you another analogy. If NASA, the Space Administration, can send a man to the moon and bring him back safely every time, and they have, don't tell me we can't succeed with each and every one of our missions to the gym here on Earth in a spectacular fashion as well.
Okay. All right.
Sending a man to the moon requires the application of theoretical knowledge from physics, astronomy, electronics, engineering, medicine, biology. Building muscles should be a cakewalk compared to a moonwalk.
Okay.
Don't tell me we can't succeed with every one of our missions to the gym here on Earth if they can send a man to the moon and bring him back safely each time.
Now, in your previous tapes, you've told people not to accept things blindly. So I have to ask you certain questions that people might ask, okay? Now, genetically, you've said that some people need longer recovery time.
Yes, they do.
But could it not be said that some people genetically need more of a workload?
No, not more of a work. See, I think your use of terms here is a little bit confusing.
Okay.
You're confusing. Well, actually, you did use the word more of a workload.
Yes.
No, now this is a typical mistake, TC, and I hear it all the time.
Okay.
The reason people continue to ask that question is this. They have failed to understand what the specific stimulus is in the first place that serves to trigger the growth machinery into motion. If you were able to curl 120 pounds for 10 reps and you couldn't do 11, the first rep of that set would be the easiest, requiring maybe 10% intensity of effort. That first rep would fatigue you a little bit. The second rep, therefore, would be a little bit harder, whereas the first rep may require on the order of 8 to 12% intensity of effort. The second rep may require 30% intensity of effort. The second rep fatigues you even further, of course, and the third rep is harder still, and so it goes with each successive rep of the set. Each one grows progressively harder than the preceding, until finally we get to that last possible rep, the 10th one in this case, where you're trying as hard as you can, you're gritting your teeth, you're shaking all over, you're exerting yourself maximally, and you're barely able to complete the rep. Which rep do you think obviously would be the most productive in terms of stimulating an increase in strength and size, TC?
Well, the last one, of course.
If you could curl 120 pounds for 10 reps and you only did one rep, do you think you'd ever grow?
No.
If you could curl 120 pounds for 10 reps and you only ever did 6, do you think you'd ever grow?
No.
So what is the stimulus? What is the workload that serves to induce muscular hypertrophy? It's the last rep of a set carried to failure.
Okay.
This is the important point. Sometimes I get phone consultation clients calling me back in 2 weeks saying, "Oh, gee, Mike," they're actually quite anxious. They think I'm going to get angry and reach through the phone and wring their neck. They'll say, "Mike, I tried to stay to the program, but I gave in to that temptation. I did one set. I wanted to do another set so bad. I just felt like I needed another set." And I said to him, "Well, sir, you used the word felt. What did you feel?" And he couldn't identify the feeling. The feeling, in fact, was fear and uncertainty. We didn't send men to the moon based on vague feelings. If you don't use your theoretical knowledge and apply it with 100% consistency, listener, you're never going to achieve bodybuilding success. Yes, I told him, of course you felt like you could do another set. In fact, if I stuck a shotgun up your butt, you'd be here in the gym for 3 days training nonstop. A bodybuilding workout is not an endurance contest. Then I pointed out, look, the specific stimulus that triggers the growth machinery into motion is that last rep of a set carried to failure. And beyond that, once you have achieved growth stimulation on that last rep, you don't have to do it again. This is the fallacy. This is the mistake.
All right, let me bring in a quote from a third party here. This is are you familiar with Charles Poliquin? He's an Olympic strength coach.
What's his name?
Charles Poliquin. He's a Canadian strength coach. He's coached.
It rings the bell.
Okay. Well, he had this to say regarding high-intensity training. He says he doubts that it works as a year-in, year-out training method. He says that strength gains are correlated with total motor unit activation, and he doesn't think one set to failure training will get you to recruit all the motor units available.
Well, actually, I've got a response to that here.
Okay.
In fact, it's from one of your listeners, TC, or not listeners, but readers.
Okay.
Bill Phillips took the time last week to send me a couple letters from your readers in response to the stuff in your magazine about me. Can I read this to you quickly?
Sure.
Dear Bill, I have just renewed my subscription to Muscle Media 2000, and I am presently recovering from a heavy-duty workout. Yes, Mentzer's hot. However, I am not writing this letter to give Mentzer praise. I am writing this letter to thank him for saving my life. Overtraining was literally killing me. At best, my yearly gains were marginal, and I was constantly plagued by fatigue, minor injuries, and flu-like symptoms. I attempted to induce gains by adding calories, but I only got fat, so I looked worse. Heavy-duty training was my last resort. I figured that I might as well give it a shot since I had nothing to lose. Hell, I didn't gain from what I was doing anyway. To make a long story short, intense heavy-duty training works. It's brief, effective, and it doesn't fry your nervous system. Thanks again, and tell Mike to keep up the good work. Yours very truly, Sean Jones. P.S. This is the point. P.S. If people doubt the effectiveness of Mentzer's theories, maybe they can talk to one of his most famous trainees. You know, Dorian, what's his name? When people bring up a hypothetical objection to high-intensity training, stating it cannot or does not work, I become a little bit bored by those people You know, we have this thing called reality and evidence. It worked for Dorian Yates, Aaron Baker, David Dirth, David Paul, Mike Mentzer, Roland Kickinger, and an untold number of thousands and thousands of others. It does work. Yes, it does build strength, but that is a prerequisite for building size. Remember back in high school, TC, either you or one of your friends had a broken arm. They put it in a cast. After 3 or 4 weeks, they take the cast off, and the first thing you notice is your arm shriveled up, the muscle atrophied. What is the first thing the physical therapist does to build up the muscle? He gives you strength training exercises, for Christ's sake. If you want to get bigger, you got to get stronger. Yes, heavy-duty training is essentially a strength training program, but you cannot get bigger without getting stronger. When a muscle atrophies, it gets weaker. When it hypertrophies, it gets stronger. There is a relationship between strength and size.
Okay, great.
Is that sufficient answer?
Sure, okay. Let's get a little bit more simplistic here. What are your views regarding like free weights compared to machines? Do you have any preferences? Is it necessary to use free weights always?
If you were to believe the manufacturers of free weights, TC, you would have the idea that mankind has benefited enormously in every aspect of his life due to scientific technology and mechanization, in every aspect of his existence except bodybuilding. Now here's the most important point perhaps. Again, TC and dear listener, as a bodybuilder, obviously your primary goal is not merely to handle heavy weights, once again, as I said before, but to achieve high-intensity muscular contractions. When you're doing an incline press with a free bar, for instance, TC, a certain significant portion of your focus and effort is diverted away from moving the resistance towards the problems of balance and coordination. And to the extent that your attention is diverted from the resistance towards the problems of balance and coordination, you make the exercise that much less effective in terms of achieving a high-intensity muscular contraction. When you're doing an incline press with a free bar, for instance, TC, a certain significant portion of your focus and effort is diverted away from moving the resistance towards the problems of balance and coordination. And to the extent that your attention is diverted from the resistance towards the problems of balance and coordination, you make the exercise that much less effective in terms of achieving a high-intensity muscular contraction. I have my in-the-gym clients use a guided mechanism, an incline press machine or a Smith machine, so that none of their energy, effort, or focus is wasted even slightly towards the problems of balance and coordination. In other words, all of their effort is directed merely against the resistance so they can achieve a maximum contraction of the muscle. That's the best answer by far. No one can possibly refute the validity of that statement.
Okay.
Well, they can refute it, but it will not be. It won't work.
All right.
It's really a very interesting thing. We did have this thing called the Industrial Revolution, which followed from the Enlightenment. It's one of the things that makes our country and Western civilization so superior to the rest of the world. And yet bodybuilders seem to forget that. Yes, I love machines. I love my car. I love my electric lights. I love my video, my 50-inch TV, hot and cold running water. I love the dentist and his drill. I love the surgeon and his tools.
Okay. All right.
Where would you rather live? In the United States of America, where we have all of these wonderful creature comforts, or in India, where people are still walking around starving and dying at the age of 13 due to dehydration because they reject Western science?
Point well taken. Okay. Do you train your abs and calves in the same manner? Do they respond the same way to high-intensity training?
Exactly. Especially with regards to the abs. A lot of people are obsessed with training their abs. They think that performing endless numbers of sit-ups will somehow whittle away the fat on the abs, which of course is ridiculous. There is no such thing, listener, as a localized fat loss. And you cannot achieve even generalized fat loss by exercise alone. the losing of body fat is contingent primarily upon calories. If you're consuming less calories than you need for maintenance, your body will be forced to revert to its fat stores for energy. And over a period of time, you will see fat lost from all areas of the body, including the abs. And beyond that, the abdominals, understand, are skeletal muscles, just like your pectorals, your latissimus, your biceps, your triceps. Therefore, they respond to the same type of stimulus, high-intensity training in little amounts. Now, the old saying that the calves are stubborn because we run, we walk, we climb stairs, therefore they need more work, is the most ridiculous argument of all. If overtraining is the problem, how can overtraining be the solution? What the calves require is not more work, TC, but a radically different type of work, a radical departure in the type of activity they're commonly exposed to. They need very, very intense, heavy training. And because they're already overtrained, you got to be very careful. The calves require less work than every other body part, not more. In other words, if overtraining is the problem and you're suggesting more training is the solution, that's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Okay.
There are people who will try it. There are people who will try it. As Arthur Jones said years ago, Mike, don't ask me to explain the actions of irrational people. You can't explain irrationality of that sort. Some people are just so stupid they've never learned anything even slightly about the nature of knowledge, logic, or its application. There are those people for whom you can draw a picture on a wall that a blind man or an idiot can see, but this poor son of a bitch just turns his head.
Okay.
In fact, Dorian Yates and I, whenever Dorian Yates comes over here and I train him, we go out to dinner, we chuckle. He says, Mike, when are these guys going to realize that we're over here holding up the light and that it truly is the light? Why do they continue to insist in crawling backwards towards the darkness? And then I told him what Arthur Jones says, Dorian, if I could explain the actions of irrational people, they wouldn't be irrational.
All right.
Some people just don't value logic. For some people, the argument that 2 and 2 was 4 just goes right over their head. They would rather be off over here going to a dance party at the nightclub or snorting cocaine or watching the same rerun of Laverne and Shirley for the 58th time rather than pick up a philosophy book by Ayn Rand and learn how to think.
Okay. You've never discussed diet in bodybuilding. Maybe that's because we haven't asked you, but I get the idea that you think diet is a little bit overrated.
Well, it's not overrated. There are certain aspects of it that are inordinately emphasized. Actually, this is a very interesting one. As much confusion as there does exist on the subject of training, and we all know it's enormous, the subject of nutrition is even more confusing for most people. But in fact, and most interesting, the subject of nutrition is actually very simple. And I am not seeking to oversimplify it even slightly. I am not seeking to oversimplify it even slightly, listener, when I say that with regards to nutrition, all you really have to be concerned with is in making a reasonable effort on a daily basis to obtain a well-balanced diet. A well-balanced diet, by definition, is one that provides your body with all the nutrients it needs. Let me restate that. A well-balanced diet, by definition, is one that provides your body with all the nutrients it needs. Now let's focus on the key concept there, need or needs. It is a term that reverberates throughout the entire realm of biology. If you've ever studied biology, sociology, psychology, you've come across the word need and how important a role it plays. A very important aspect of biology, of crucial concern to all those listening, of course, is nutrition. The concept of need in the context of nutrition implies a limit that cannot be transcended. Let's say, for instance, TC, you need 25 milligrams of vitamin C. And that's true according to all of your reputable, and I emphasize the word reputable, according to all of your reputable nutritional scientists, all you need is 25 milligrams of vitamin C a day. Now, let's say all of a sudden you start taking a vitamin C supplement that provides you with as much as 3,000 milligrams a day. That will not force your body to utilize even one more milligram than it needs, or 26. Again, in the context of nutrition, the concept of need implies a limit that cannot be transcended. Now, when you drink more water than you need, you obviously just excrete it. You do not have that same luxury with proteins, fats, and carbs because they contain calories. What happens when you consume more calories than you need? You get fat. Now the question arises, what do I need calories and nutrients for? Number one, most obviously, is to maintain your existing physical mass. And number two, to provide for muscle growth beyond normal levels. However, this is where you got to go to reality and be very careful. Muscle growth on a daily basis, even at best, is negligible. TC, if you were to gain 30 pounds of muscle this year, you'd be quite delighted.
Right.
You won't, because you won't follow my theory all the way through, but that's okay. I can't explain the actions of irrational people. I'm just teasing.
Okay.
By the way, if you're ever in California, TC, and you want to learn something truly meaningful about exercise, stop in and see me. I'll put you through a couple workouts.
You're damn right I will. Okay.
I'll introduce you to some of my in-the-gym clients to let you know that I'm not exaggerating when I say that my clients are all making progress, ranging from significant to dramatic, and in non-too-few cases, literally phenomenal.
Okay, terrific.
Including Dorian Yates.